Sahana bhavatu, sahana punuktu, saha viryam karavavai, tejasvinavaditam astoma viddhishavai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great vigor. May we not unnecessarily cover with each other. May our study be illumined. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So happy Easter, or happy Pasch, as many, many Christians would call it. So rebirth and Easter. By now, of course, many children will be hunting in gardens and houses for chocolate Easter eggs. This is one custom that engages young people with this Easter celebration. And as with every kind of religious celebration or even pastoral celebration, there will always be an overlap between the commercial aspect of things and the religious aspect of things and the deeper spiritual aspect of things. So there's a distinction between these three. Let's start with the original thing. By now you'll see from yesterday's talk that the drama has been enacted. And the drama is played out in Christian tradition, if you will, or at least Western Christian tradition, from the very crib, the birth of Jesus, which has a number of different symbolic elements, one of which is a lamb. The traditional Christmas crib scene, the manger scene, is adopted by many people as a very warm, homely family scene. A delightful birth of a child is absolutely a birth of any kind is celebrated. And of course, springtime is a good place to start with the theme of a birth. Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita tells us that I am flowery spring, he says. That means whenever we see the appearance, in this part of the world at least, of yellow flowers, daffodils and so on, we will be reminded that these first buds appearing on the tree and so on is a kind of indication that elevates our mood and our spirit. It reminds us that there is a new opportunity away from the oppression, let us say, of winter and then autumn. Autumn itself is a beautiful period of time. But then spring. I'm reminded of a small joke. Somebody said to a farmer in Ireland, spring in the air. And he replies, no, why should I? So this custom of Easter eggs and the custom of having lambs and so on and so forth goes way back. And even the Christmas scene where a lamb is there has a darker side to it. It reminds us of a paschal lamb. And the feast of Pasch or Passover, the Jewish kind of festival, that reminds people of the Exodus. So there's a much deeper meaning to all of these symbols in every religion that we find. And it reminds us as the foretaste of this death event, a kind of portend of the end, physical end at least, of this Messiah. Now, the practice, of course, of decorating eggs and eggshells is quite ancient. It's an ancient custom, all associated, no doubt, with this festival of spring. Because in the very early days, ostrich eggs have been found in Africa, which are roughly about 6,000 years old. And in the pre-dynastic period of Egypt, and all the early cultures of, let's say, Mesopotamia, Crete, and so on, eggs were associated with death and rebirth, and also associated with kingship. And you can see how this can be incorporated into any religious festival. which is centered around a life of a person born at one moment, following the life to some extent, some years of Jesus's events or his life, his biography are missing from, let's say, the age of 12 to the age of about 30, creating much speculation, no doubt. But we can see that the decorated ostrich eggs that I mentioned and the representation of ostrich eggs in gold and silver as they were commonly placed in graves in the ancient Sumerians and Egyptians as early as 5,000 years ago. We can see then this mix of this puzzling observed event throughout human history, that there is a birth, there is a life, there is a death. And the question, is there in fact a rebirth? And the rebirth idea has three aspects to it. Firstly, maybe there's a continuation in another kind of realm. Maybe it's the realm of the ancestors. Maybe we should speculate that the origin of religion, or one of the origins of religion, might well be this wish that our ancestors survive. And this, as I have mentioned in previous talks, is there even today in many cultures. It's there in the African culture or the sub-Saharan African culture. It was there in the Egyptian culture also. It is there in the Chinese culture, Indian culture. Just about everywhere you can think of, some aspect of ancestor worship is preserved. And so one possibility is that maybe somebody that has died will continue their life in another realm. And that means, therefore, that some essential quality or some essential part of the person, if you will, is not dead. It survives. That's a wonderful clue. Let's face it, nobody can really ever imagine themselves dead. Somebody said, "Oh, I dreamt I was dead." All right, but then who was watching the corpse? You can't get away from this fundamental identity of I. And that leads us to the spiritual aspect of things. People ask me, do you believe in rebirth or reincarnation? And my fanciful answer is from a philosophical point of view. And I say, no, I don't, because I don't believe in this incarnation. So this is the non-dualistic approach to the whole business. But the non-dualistic approach is a final conclusion that we can have. And that leads to possibility number 2, that there is a coming and going, no doubt, of intentions, of experiences. A habit level is carried over. There's no doubt what we really encapsulate in the word soul carries over. But the fundamental I, the Atman, always remains the same. And when we realize this, it's another kind of awakening. Arise, awake, Swami Vivekananda's interpretation of Uttishta Jagrata Prabhya Varannibodhata. Arise, awake. Don't stop until the goal is reached. So, what is that goal? Well, any goal is viewed as something in the future, but then you can see how Swami Vivekananda uses this word goal again. Each soul is potentially divine. The goal, he says, is to manifest this divinity from within. And so if we use the whole of nature's seasons as an analogy, we will very clearly see that spring represents a new hope, a new possibility, something that is associated with the rise of the sun's rise. And so once again, we can see that it represents for us the theme of rebirth. Reviewing Jesus' life, I mentioned yesterday the rebellious aspect. I'm going to change the term, not so much rebellious, but reformation, reformer. All of the great incarnations and prophets and so on were all great reformers. And deliberately he climbs into the lion's den of traditionalism. Who is he associating with in Jesus' day, as in today in many cultures? See, leprosy can be cured today, but in Jesus' time and not so long ago, leprosy was a contagious disease and was really, leper was somebody who was outside of the norm, somebody to be avoided, with flaking skin and so on, and sores all over the body. Who would touch the hand of a leper? Jesus catches the hand of a leper, and you can see the love that says, I'm engaging everybody in this spiritual adventure, in this new message, this good news about the internal kingdom of heaven. Many people interpreted in the early days that this kingdom of heaven was either an earthly kingdom, that is really what the Messiah is traditionally all about, or a kingdom in the future about to come, an apocalyptic movement that I'm sure St. Paul would have held, and the early apostles were holding this view of an imminent expectation of a Christ returning or a Jesus returning and rescuing us, taking us to a glorious new dimension, if you will, or a new era at least. And as time goes on, we see that this is getting further and further away, and we have to find more the spiritual interpretation of it. The dates of Easter are really up for grabs, or were up for grabs for some significant period of time. But what we'll see is in the life of Jesus, this association with the discarded of society, people who felt that there were some unclean people in society. Who are the unclean people? Lepers, cripples, people who have physical aberrations, blind people, people who were prostitutes. And then there is the event of the woman touching Jesus' garment. She was hemorrhaging. In other words, she was ritualistically unclean from the temple's point of view. So Jesus is creating a conflict with traditionalism. And therein we find the difference between spirituality and religion, in the sense that religious practices with no real meaning, just a traditionalism there. And then there is the spirituality, the real meaning of it. He was bold enough to do things you shouldn't, strictly speaking, do on the Sabbath. He associated with people who were unclean according to the religious definition of ritualistic purity. So here is Christ showing us the way of how we should behave, looking at people in equal-mindedness. On what basis? On the basis that the kingdom of heaven lies within. And when we discover it, it is like a new dawn breaking, a new chorus, if you will, breaking and surprising us, so that we become not just optimistic, not just hopeful, but we become joyful. There's a great difference. And with every feast, there's a joy. People traditionally are allowed to eat eggs because this is what they have been excluding from their diet during the fasting period, among other things. But you see, what comes out of an egg, something hatches, a new life, a rebirth comes about. And we can see this is where all animals are mating. This is where rabbits are hopping around in gardens. This is where the days are lengthened. This is where the sun rises so beautiful, the sunset so rewarding. The English, one term for Easter, of course, is Pasch, and I mentioned that it's going back to the Jewish Passover. Of course, as Christianity developed, it also develops this sense of Orthodox traditionalism and says we don't really want to be associated with anything Jewish, so we revise some dates. So let us tell you what those might be. You see, The Jewish Passover is actually the 23rd of April in 2024. That's how it's calculated. And so you can see we're far away from this date. The 25th of March was the full moon, and the Christian tradition had come about as it is the first Sunday, if you will, that is the first celebration of sunrise, and sunrise itself representing this resurrection. We'll come on to that shortly. And this then becomes today, 31st of March, according to the Gregorian calendar, but many traditions are still following the Julian calendar, which means that Easter for them will be the 5th of May. Now, you might think that this is quite insignificant, but you see, when you emphasize this orthodoxy about the dates and times and rituals and practices, you can see this is a great illustration of how our attention can be diverted to relatively unimportant things. So you see, in Christianity, the First Council of Nicaea, that was 325 years after the purported birth of Jesus, established only two rules about the dates: that there should be an independence of the Hebrew calendar and worldwide uniformity. That's important. Worldwide uniformity. There's another reason to draw away from this Passover event, even though we should keep it in mind. Let's review what is the Passover event. Well, it is reminiscent of this great, great exodus that took place, going from the foreign land, the land of slavery, to the land of freedom and liberation. In Ireland, Easter Day is celebrated in two ways. First of all, there is the Christian festival. But secondly, there is the Easter uprising, why rebels decided that Easter Sunday, Easter Day, should be the day where they institute a revolt in 1916, may be significant, that there is a new momentum toward freedom of all kinds. So anyway, it has come to be, as I say, the first Sunday after the ecclesiastical full moon. It occurs on or soonest after 21st of March. Even if it's calculated on the basis of the Gregorian calendar, the date of that full moon also sometimes differs. But you see, the meaning is the same regardless of the date. By the way, of course, the English term of Easter is derived from the Saxon spring festival, Oistra. And this, therefore, complies with this Nicene Council, which says it should be worldwide uniformity. And so the Saxon Spring Festival, again, Spring Festival I emphasize, and again, Krishna, I emphasize this, of all the seasons, I'm the flowery spring, that time of year where the flowers come and show this more than optimism, this great joy exhibited by Mother Nature herself. And so Oistra is this goddess. It's linked to, as I say, this Jewish Passover festival, whose origin is taken from the Synoptic Gospels. And both the crucifixion and resurrection have taken place in the week of Passover, and by much of its symbolism, as well, of course, as its position in the calendar. But this goddess is Oistra, is really traditionally celebrated by the early, even the early Celts, really, who took this over as that month, the month of Oistra, that is corresponding to the month of April itself. There was once called a goddess named Oistra, in whose honor the feast was celebrated in that month. She was the mother of fertility, if you will. Now, sometimes, of course, today is called Resurrection Sunday, and the key to Christian theology and Christianity itself will be this empty tomb and this resurrection. Gospels differ a little bit on the events of this, but one thing is sure, that those who went, in Mark's Gospel anyway, women to anoint the body, they were confronted by a man. They don't say it was anything special. It's just somebody who says, yeah, he's gone, but you'll go and find him in Galilee. Now that's a very interesting thing, and many appearances then occur in Galilee. Galilee is some way away. And Galilee, therefore, represents the ministry of Jesus. And included in that ministry would be this message: the kingdom of heaven is close at hand. The kingdom of heaven is within you. There are many, many appearances after these great, great waves, which we call incarnations. For example, I think you can find in almost every example some kind of appearance. You see visions occurred, for example, after the Mahasamadhi of Sri Ramakrishna. There are people who saw visions of him. Swami Vivekananda himself saw the vision of Ramakrishna beckoning him across the ocean when he was sitting there in Kanyakumari, contemplating what is the future destiny, the future mission. What does it all mean? And there we find the same thing. If you see the photograph, the last photograph taken of Sri Ramakrishna lying on his side, many people find it difficult to see it, with all the intimate followers around him. And look how sad they are. Look how devastated they are. This corresponds, of course, to the feeling we have in Good Friday. And then we see this transition to hope. There must be some meaning. Why did this all happen? And then this inspiration. In the Jewish Christian language, the spirit takes over. What we call the Shakti, the divine energy, takes over. And takes over the destiny. So we have these various difference of opinions about the dates, and that indicates one thing, not just traditionalism, but it indicates how important Easter is. I keep telling people in the Christian tradition, Easter is the primary festival in Christianity. I keep telling people here, asking them, what are you doing to celebrate Easter? And not realizing, thinking that Christmas is the greatest festival. It does seem like that, but no. Easter is the great festival. Why? Because where did this body of Jesus go to? How is it that there was an empty tomb? We can put in some philosophical and spiritual interpretations. Empty tomb. We feel empty sometimes when we find no meaning in life. And I said there were several interpretations about the whole subject of where do we go, as it were, when we die. And of course, our final conclusion says, we don't go anywhere. We're not on a train. We look as if we are, but no, we are the observer. Our highest conclusion is contained in the Mandukya Upanishad of 12 short verses with extensive commentary by Gaudapada, Shankaracharya's grand teacher. And there, very, very, very carefully, it's put that there is a witness, observer, knower, thinker behind everything, behind all this range of experience that we call waking, dream, and dreamless sleep. 3 states of consciousness containing potentiality, containing expression, and containing what we have when our eyes are open When our eyes are closed, the inner eye comes. But when the inner eye goes, there is a peace. And when the peace itself is observed, when all of that is taken away, when we now resort to the witness itself, the essence, where there's no longer anything to witness, it is pure being by itself, then we have found the rise of knowledge, a kind of internal resurrection. So that's another way of talking about rebirth. Now you see, we can take a point of view that we started our life at one point, let's call it the soul, and continue on infinitely. But as Swami Vivekananda refers to this matter in his kind of way of expressing it, he says very clearly, if it's infinite, it was always infinite. We have to rule out this possibility. What's the second possibility? All our behavioral traits must be learned. All behavior is experience. We can say in the light of modern evolutionary theory that the experience even of a single-cell organism, such as a bacteria, let's say a bacillus, a rod-shaped bacteria, its experiences are compounded and cells learn. More accurately, the inner quintessence of the cell is driving the cells forward to be more and more successful. We can add our Vedanta understanding of it to the modern evolutionary theory. And that drives forward so that all our accumulated systems will be something like a combined cooperative of brain cells and blood cells and liver cells, of cells within the spleen. And all of this physical experience is there. And so, could we therefore say that our behavior experience is a carryover from this, combined of X and Y chromosomes? Swami Vivekananda points out this cannot be, because there's no boundary to what we call the mind. There's every evidence that we get physical inheritance. There's absolutely no evidence that we get behavioral inheritance. It is from a previous life. That's his final conclusion. And so logically he comes to this idea of what we call transmigration or reincarnation. But still we're caught in the trap. And we need to get out of that. So the early Christians, they would have celebrated a meal to commemorate Jesus' death, no doubt. But then they would have celebrated his subsequent resurrection. And that means that they were convinced that essentially, although his body may have passed away, or maybe he would have assembled his body, this is the common idea, that there was a bodily resurrection. And that the end of times would be characterized by bodily resurrection, but not physical. Not material, not the body made from cells, but some kind of supernatural state. Let's bring in a spiritual interpretation now. What kind of state might that be? It's a state of sublime bliss. So that followers of Jesus will go to, we might say, Christ Loka. Followers of Ramakrishna will go to Ramakrishna Loka. Followers of Buddha will go to Buddha Loka, Krishna Loka, Rama Loka. All of the followers will go to that particular Loka. And that Loka, philosophically, we call Hiranyagarbha. Cosmic mind, a kind of seed, a womb for all of creation and creativity. And from there, according to our Vedas, we make a transition, either in one of two ways. We either make the transition from Brahma Loka to our essence, to freedom, to moksha, to liberation, or we become reborn as a great, great incarnation or prophet, or we can become reborn as a great yogi and do something for the welfare of mankind. You'll find this, of course, in the Buddhist tradition, Northern Buddhist tradition, the concept of Bodhi Dharma, the the Bodhi, the Buddha that is born for the salvation of everyone. So these are some thoughts about the celebration of Easter, Ustra, Pascha, or Resurrection Day, whatever you like to call it. But we can see that there is every hope for us to reach our highest conclusion, where we come across this realization that actually this resurrection is something significant. Every day we have the opportunity for a new resolve, a new beginning. Every minute is an opportunity, nay, every second is an opportunity for rebirth, a change in our thought patterns, a change in our habit level, progressively creating for us a condition of pure sattva, purity. And in that purity, we find the glory that we can only compare to the rising sun, or we can compare to the spring followed by the summer, a kind of new opportunity where a magnificent new life is created from an egg. All life comes from it. And a continuation of this creation that we call procreation. So, with this background of Easter, and with the background of a life of somebody who leads us there, where equanimity of outlook is our example, an equanimity of outlook which considers every single pleasant or unpleasant aspect to be equal, whether it's lepers, whether it's cripples, whether it's blind people, whether it is disfigured people, whether it is socially excluded people. All of these were equal in the sight of this one being, because if we examine the wiring of this being, we'll see that he had a penetrating vision which transcended all of these aberrations and inequalities and only saw the one perfection in everyone. So may we also do the same. And of course, since it's only now, well, some people think it's 8 minutes past 10, but anyway, it's 8 minutes past 11. We can leave some time maybe for some discussion. And because normally this Sunday is reserved for question answer. And we'll see if you can add anything to what I've just said.
It was just really about when you were mentioning around, the belief in reincarnation and how the parts of us that keep us away from the awareness and the evolution is traits of past lives. And I suppose I was thinking about, well, what are the parts of me that prevent me in this life, and how do I differentiate between those and the parts that I've taken from a past life?
Well, that's a good question, but it's also a meaningless question, forgive my reply, because the past is gone and cannot be changed. So we have to deal with the present moment. The only thing we can do is to change the future, and that is by investing in this second. So this second, we have the opportunities to stand back and see what is going through the mental field. And often what is going through the mental field, particularly when we are not occupied with anything in particular, will be things like doubt and fear and temptation and regret and guilt and all of these things. And of course, there is a common process used often by psychologists, psychiatrists to say, we'll solve your problems when we go backwards into the past. But really, I don't think that that will work. Now you may say, but don't we do that when we go through the Enneagram, for example, and find out, is there some formation background, historical formation background for this particular sense of I, this ego, this persona? Yes, that's quite useful because now we know what we're dealing with. But to make it the formula for a remedy will not be useful, whether it's in the context of psychology, psychiatry, or whether it's in the context of figuring out how did we get here? What were the elements of karma, if you will, the causal relationship between where that and where we are now? I don't see any merit in it, simply because even the last second you cannot change. It's gone forever. You missed that train. But another train is coming. Put something useful in it. Make sure there's a good destination. Make it joyful. On the basis that practicing the divine presence is here and now. And I just have to repeat with Joel Goldsmith, what is meditation? We can put it in any context. Even now is a meditation. It's a song of gratitude that God is here, God is now, God is love. Finished. What more do we want? When we insert that, anything to do with the past is gone. But I remind you of my standard statement. Do you believe in reincarnation? No, I don't believe in this incarnation. Why would I believe in another one? Of course, that doesn't mean to say that there is no realm in which we carry over our experiences. This is one of them, called the waking state. And it has its effect in the dream world also, but it all disappears in a dreamless sleep. The important thing is that there is a knower, thinker, witness that is looking at it. And as long as and that is caught in this present moment. The waking state has a history to it and has a strategy that will readjust things on the basis that I'm an individuality. And so what I will do is I'll create a struggle against unfair odds. But then there's some entity looking and observing at it. And that is really the essence. That is your inner Christ. That is the risen Christ. And then dream we can recall. And we dismiss it as something unreal only because we're evaluating it from the waking state. Assuming the waking state is real, and it's not. So what do we really mean by getting out of this realm of rebirth and getting out of this karma? It is to tune our attention into the glory of the self now, not later, not posthumously even. So if you want to know all the details of how your history, of how you became led to this particular scenario, it'll be extremely complex and occupy all your time and allow you to miss the glory of this present moment. And that glory, that insertion, that shift of attention will actually be the seeds of your future fruits, your future karma, actually. That's what you should really tend to.
Thanks, Swamiji. Thank you so much.
Okay, all good.
I have a question.
Oh, there's a kind of question in-house. Okay.
And when these anxieties are coming up and the fears coming up and all these things, where are they coming from? They're coming from something that happened to you in the past, no?
Yes. So the question is, when these aberrations arise, fear and doubt and so on and temptation, when they arise, where are they coming from? They're coming from a cumulative experience that's settled in the unconscious mind. But you cannot deal with the unconscious mind directly. You can only do it through the conscious mind. All of these experiences were at one point conscious, in the conscious realm, and then transferred to a history, an internal history, a kind of internal library, an internal memorandum. The accumulation of these impressions we call we call subconscious impressions anyway. Samskaras. Samskara is a technical term for it. And it will be a mixture. It will be a mixture of good and bad and what have you. But as long as we hold a sense of individuality, where individual survival is paramount, these will all be negative. So how do we put in positive things into the unconscious? We change our thinking now and put new impressions in and play a kind of game, just to remind you of how I think, or not how I think, but the scriptural basis is there, that we put in sattva, we put in purity, all the noble ideas, strong, true, wise, full, free, with great meaning. Put all that in, particularly when the mind is not occupied with anything. You see, if we leave the mind unchanneled, if we take our attention and suspend it, let's say a normal mundane task, a repetitive task, let's say, and during that, walking, running, brushing the teeth, bathing, etc., and the mind is not particularly occupied in any particular way, then these past ghosts will come and haunt you. And so that's okay, we can notice them and restrict their number. Let's say 4 seconds. Well, then if you're allocated 20 seconds of opportunities, then the next 16 seconds you put in the highest, noblest thoughts you can think of, using the capacity of your great imagination, your creative imagination. Put the values in there, not just as words, but as feelings, until everything becomes stabilized. And then you review it. And you'll see that in your unconscious realm, you're up by plus 12 over 20 seconds. And that's put into your fixed deposit account. That's the game you play. And we have a name for it, Game of Life. The title of it is borrowed from the author Florence Scovel Shinn in a book, The Game of Life, How to Play It. It's a fundamental book that I recommend for everybody. And I think I discovered...
What's the name of the book?
The Game of Life.
Game of Life.
And How to Play It. Yeah. Florence Scovel Shinn. It's a very old book, probably dating from the 1930s already or something like that. But it's a fundamental book. You see, the last 2 world wars of the 20th century were devastating to many people, and most people didn't want a repetition of the thing, and they had studied some elements of Vedanta or Eastern philosophy and put it in to a new kind of language or new kind of message about how to deal with these things at a fundamental level. And this Game of Life and How to Play It is one such things, because what is our fundamental philosophy about life? We call it lila. We call it a game, a play. It's a play of all kinds of activities, all kinds of dramatic events that we take extremely seriously. Now, some elements have to be taken a little seriously, simply because if we didn't, we would have no human compassion. But still, this game of life is there to be played, and all we can see is a play of waves, coming and going, some in our favor, some not, some good, some bad, all contrasting. And the contrast is necessary to make this game, make this machine work that we call life. So if you have a machine, you have to put oil in it, you have to make sure that the things don't get entangled. There's a certain maintenance required. Our basic maintenance is called positive thinking. And that positive thinking reaches its highest when we make it spiritual thinking.
So you can overwhelm negative thoughts with positive thoughts.
Yes, that's the whole idea. And we identify what negative thoughts are there, and they come into the classification of what we call gunas, binding elements, that we find are in combination is what we call life itself. Whether it's on the realm of physics, where we have inertia, electrical energy, and gravitation, or whether it's in the realm of the mind, where we have depression, guilt, darkness, or a get up and go enthusiastic element within us which is still self-based, egocentric, selfish. Both of these will cause us pain. But when we promote what all religions promote, today is Easter, so Jesus would have promoted the highest values. We were talking earlier about that. And these highest values in thought, in word and deed, we have to inculcate and practice. And that is really beyond positive thinking. So those who are familiar with my well-worn examples will say that positive thinkers will say the glass is half full, but the negative pessimistic people will say the glass is half empty. But the spiritual person, the Vedanta, will say the glass is always full and overflowing. It was never empty. So this is what we call fullness. Fullness. Fullness, that is, as opposed to emptiness. Fullness, Purna, we call it. Purna is fullness. Emptiness we call Shunya. The fact that everything that is in the relative world can disappear doesn't make it empty. It actually, only fullness remains, only fullness is there. It looks for us as if the sun goes down and rises every morning. The people of the past may have thought that the sun is revolving around us, a heliocentric point of view. A geocentric point of view. And then, of course, Copernicus and so on, they tell us, no, it's a heliocentric point of view. And so it's not that the sun goes around us, we go around the sun. So if you're a caveman and want to investigate what is this sun, you may record in the early morning, let's say now, say 5 o'clock, Mr. Sun is rising. It's born. Congratulations, everybody celebrate. And we can observe its transition in its life. We can see how it goes into puberty and teenagehood and old age or middle age, and finally, unfortunately, as Sun said, poor Mr. Sun died. Well, everything is dark now. Let's go into depression until the morning. Reincarnation, the sun rose again. The sun was never born. It never went through teenagehood. It never died. It never reincarnated. But it looks like it. So this is our great illusion. And we have to assert continuously this fullness. And scripture is a way of endorsing it. If you didn't catch it this way, you'll catch it that way. Giving us a variety of approaches that convince us in principle of this existence of this fullness. This kingdom of heaven is within us in Jesus' language. And that the risen Christ is actually what was always there. It was always there in full glory. And so once we are convinced in principle, the next thing is, how can we convince our feelings, our emotions? How can we catch them up? That is called practice, and consists of the combinations of directing the willpower, is called tapasya, that is discipline. How we can direct the feelings, rally the emotions around to their highest expression, including art, culture, using the creativity, capacity of the imagination and so on. All of that we can insert. And retaining an element of understanding the principles of it, logic. And understanding the principle of it, the very fundamental, we call this exercise of doing this discernment, technically called viveka. Understanding what is permanent, what is not, what is lasting, what is not. We're caught up in an illusion to say that this whole realm that we live in, a construct of space and time, is real. But you see, the more we study this world, the more we are convinced of what the ancient people observed anyway, what any normal person would observe if they have a mind to it. that as long as there's time, there's change. And something that changes is not permanent. It's very simple. And that if you remove space, all objects have gone. All defined objects have gone. And we do it every night when we go into deep sleep. In deep sleep, all objects are gone. And then we find we're peaceful because there's no second to argue with or divorce or fight with or struggle with. So there it is in a nutshell. All right. Then finally, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thank you. Enjoy your Easter.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you,
Deepak.
Swamiji. Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you, Swamiji and Deepak. Thank you for all the work. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Swamiji, and happy Easter.
Thank you.
Oh.